In Europe today, every second counts. It's hard to believe how in such a short space of time so much has happened. A pandemic, war, an unprecedented energy crisis, not to mention the growing impacts of climate change. All of this has given even greater urgency now to the energy transition, and it's shown us that renewables are not just about climate change, they give us energy security and sovereignty. It's renewables that are going to bring down our energy bills. People now see we need more renewables ASAP, which means we've got to sort out now the things that are holding us back from building all these new wind farms that governments now want. So it's time to simplify the permitting. EU's got good new rules now on permitting, overriding public interest, all the permits decided in 2 years, even sooner for repowering. Governments have now got to implement this and digitalise their permitting processes. It's time to ramp up our supply chain, to get it back to growth. Our industrial capacity and infrastructure has got to match governments' new targets. It's time to make investments happen, to have stable rules in electricity markets, clear visibility on future auctions with big volumes and the right design. We've got to make Europe an attractive place again to invest in renewables. It's time to focus on the grid. There's no point building new wind farms if they're not connected to consumers. And it's time to electrify our transport, heating and industrial processes. Now, all of this is going to require huge effort, of course, and collaboration between industry, government, NGOs, grid operators, energy consumers and communities. It's all hands on deck. It's time to deliver.
Deputy Prime Minister, Ministers, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wind Europe 2023. I'm delighted to give the floor to the CEO of Green Power Denmark, Mr. Christian Jensen. Christian, the floor is yours.
Commissioner, Deputy Prime Minister, dear ministers, dear friends, also a warm welcome from me and the Danish energy sector to Denmark and to this Wind Europe annual event. We all know that the answer to combat climate change, increase energy security and ensure energy independence in Europe is to rapidly increase the amount of solar and wind in the European energy mix. That's a fact. The energy system of tomorrow is not the energy system of yesterday or even today. The resilience needs to be increased even more than we might thought in the past. And we need to be better bolstered against outside disruption and to avoid future energy crises. By expanding renewables, building more grid, and focusing more on hydrogen, storage, and smart use, we will create tomorrow's energy system in Europe. The meeting yesterday in Ostende was a positive example of cooperation that we need much more of. Europe is doing a lot to bolster renewables, but we still need to do more, to do it better, and to do it faster. Green Power Denmark was established last year by combining the business organization representing solar, wind, and grid in Denmark. With 1,500 members from every part of the electric value chain, we are required to cooperate and to come up with solutions that are best for the energy sector, for the consumers, and for society. This is a new way of cooperation in the energy sector, and I believe that the constellation is very beneficial for the electrification of our society. This conference gives an ideal setting for cooperation, discussion, and making new contacts. I hope you will make the best of it, and I wish you all a fruitful conference and exhibition. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please now welcome our host, the Minister for Climate, Energy and Utilities of Denmark, Lars Aagaard.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Copenhagen, and fascinating to hear my name. You said it right? Well, to get serious, in the span of just 20 to 30 years, we must reconstruct our entire energy supply system. We must ensure safe and competitive supply of green energy for our homes and industries. And that starts and ends with wind, onshore and offshore. We need scale, we need simplicity, predictability, but most of all, we need speed. We need to release our brakes and get going. The aim is clear: security, phase out of fossil fuels, and reach our climate goals. But a change is needed in our approach to solving our challenges. Not only is the task enormous, the complexity is also unprecedented. Succeeding will require new forms of cooperation between governments, citizens, and industries. And that is why I'm happy to be here today. This is a platform for change. We need to get together and figure out a lot of issues. How are we going to find the required space? How are we going to expand our infrastructure? How are we going to deal with the changes in consumption patterns? Even though these are not easy questions, I'm confident that we will find the answers. Until now, most of the work in this field has been done on a case-by-case basis, but now we are executing an integrated strategy for the North Sea. And yesterday, we reached a major milestone. With the Ostende Declaration, 5 new countries joined our effort. Now we aim for 120 gigawatts in 2030 and the minimum of 300 gigawatts in 2050. This is equivalent to 8,000 of the largest existing wind turbine in only 7 years. So you better get back to work when you're finished here in Copenhagen. I want to use this opportunity to thank our new partners in France, Ireland, Luxembourg, Norway, and the United Kingdom. The way I see it, there are 3 main factors slowing us down. There's too much bureaucracy, red tape. We need to ensure that electricity market can support the needed investment. And there are major challenges when we need to ensure the necessary supply chain, access to raw materials, and so on. So let's start with the red tape. In Europe, it can easily take 9 to 10 years from our political decision is made to the construction of a wind farm is done. 9 to 10 years. A wise person once said to me that the US got the market, Europe got the rules. I think we should try and change that. It's simply too slow. Some of the EU regulations, especially on the environmental regulation, is too complex, and permitting takes too long. Of course, we need to protect our ecosystem. And I'm very much aware that in the audience there are companies investing in offshore wind that are willing to invest in biodiversity. But if our rules keep us from rolling out massive offshore wind capacity, there won't be much of an ecosystem left to protect in the future to come. Second, we need to make sure that our electricity markets keeps on bringing benefits for consumers, businesses, but also for investors in new production capacity. This is why, from the Danish point of view, we only need a targeted reform of the electricity market that does not hinder the market mechanism from working properly. The market should keep on being a key driver for investments also in renewable energy. Lastly, we need to ramp up our efforts to secure access to critical raw materials. Some countries control way too much of the mining and processing of rare materials. That is not going to work for us in the long run. We also need to ramp up our or yours supply chains. We need in the future thousands of wind turbines. That also means thousands of kilometers of cables, thousands of megawatts of hydraulic capacity, many ships, more substations, and fortunately, a lot of people that has to do the job, and they have to be skilled. So not only numbers counts. Bottleneck in one of these areas can delay us and make the transition costly, but also too slow. We must manage to break down these barriers. And while we do that, we must prepare our energy infrastructure to the vast amount of green electricity that is coming. That means, of course, expanding the grid, and countries need to work together on that. But it also means we will have to start building an infrastructure for hydrogen. We must do so in order to channel some of the great energy that wind can produce for us into next generation fuels for the hard to abate sectors, planes, ships, and heavy industry. So that is also why that Denmark and Germany last month took the first steps to agree on building a hydrogen pipeline connecting our two countries. Denmark has the potential scale to produce much more electricity from our seabed. We would never be able to use that much electricity ourselves. So the possibility to export it as electricity or as hydrogen to neighboring countries is key element of setting the investment free. In many ways, we have come a long way. And in many ways, we have only just begun our journey. Together, I hope that we can loosen our handbrakes and let our engine roar, because that is what Europe needs. The offshore wind turbine is a machine that creates independence. And we need offshore wind if we want to be energy independent from countries such as Russia. And we need to support Ukraine in their fight against the unprovoked Russian aggression. Therefore, I'm honored today to announce a memorandum of understanding between Denmark and Ukraine, which will broaden and expand the close cooperation between our two countries to also include wind energy. I think all countries in Europe are dedicated to supporting Ukraine in becoming more energy resilient. We need to ensure Ukraine's access to wind energy, to freedom energy. When peace is restored and Ukraine is once again free of the Russian occupation, Denmark will support Ukraine's reconstruction and expansion of offshore wind power, which has been bombarded at the expense of the civilian population. Further, we will assist the development of offshore wind power to strengthen Ukraine's future energy independence. This memorandum of understanding is a testament to Denmark's strong commitment to support Ukraine at all levels. And I hope that when time is ready and investments can flow, it will also be supported by the European wind industry. The Russian aggression in Ukraine underlines the importance of expanding our production of renewable energy and offshore wind to secure our prosperity and to ensure our independence. So just before I will hand the floor to my dear Ukraine colleague, I just want to repeat myself. We need scale, we need simplicity and predictability, but most of all, we need speed. But now I hope that the technical part will work, and I can hand over the floor to the Ukrainian Minister of Energy, Mr. German Galushchenko, I think it is, who will deliver a pre-recorded speech. Thank you for the word.
Dear colleagues and friends, these are Ukrainian wind turbines, south of Ukraine. Before February 21st, Ukrainian wind farms, not including the temporarily occupied territories of Donbas and Crimea, had a total installed capacity of 1.67 gigawatt. By the end of 2022, Ukraine was expecting to add another 1 gigawatt of wind power. And this is Ukraine now. The war put a stop to new projects in wind energy. 74% of wind generation is out of operation. More than 80% of the installed capacity is concentrated in the temporarily occupied territories of Kherson and Zaporizhia regions and Crimea. But even with this brutal war, Ukraine's power system added 81.6 megawatt of new wind power capacity in 2022. In March this year, the first stage of the Telegul wind farm was completed. This plant features 19 ultra-modern wind turbines manufactured by the Danish company Vestas. Projects like this, which are being implemented during the Russian full-scale aggression against Ukraine, demonstrate our resilience and our will to win, but also the viability of green energy. President of Ukraine Zelensky said that Ukraine would become a leader in building a modern green energy sector. By 2050, Ukraine expects to reach 50% of renewables in the total mix. And the lion's share will be wind energy projects that will deliver more than 26 gigawatt of generation. We are looking into building clusters of the production of green hydrogen, equipment, turbines, and spare parts for wind turbines all within Ukraine. Ukraine's potential in renewable energy is among the highest in Europe. We look forward to engaging in discussions, preparing and launching projects with Denmark and other partners already today. We encourage you to start exploring opportunities in Ukraine right now. And I am pleased to announce that today, together with Minister Ogart, we are signing the Memorandum of Understanding on establishing energy partnership in the field of wind generation. We will join our efforts to further develop wind energy in Ukraine. Ukraine will recover, and the clean wind energy of a free Ukraine will strengthen the energy security of the whole European continent. Thank you for standing firmly with Ukraine.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister, not least for bringing your Ukrainian counterpart into this session. Ladies and gentlemen, please now welcome the European Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simpson.
Dear ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear Giles, thank you for inviting me to today's Wind Europe event, and it was very important for me to be here today, as Wind Europe is one of the key voices for the wind industry in the EU. From the very start of my mandate as Commissioner, I have made boosting Europe's renewable energy, including wind, one of my top priorities. And since Russia's war of aggression and the energy crisis, this priority only got more important and more urgent. Not only is homegrown renewable energy key to achieving our 2030 and 2050 climate and energy goals, it is also critical for helping Europe secure its long-term energy sovereignty. And I'm glad to see all our efforts over the past year and the REPowerEU bearing fruit. We have come a long way in a very short amount of time. 2022 was a record year for renewable energy. And last year, also across Europe, EU deployed 15 gigawatts of wind. While that's a big step forward, we still need to do much more to reach our targets of 42.5% of renewables in our energy mix by 2030, and to deliver a rapid build-out of wind and overcome structural obstacles. We are now moving from crisis mode to strategic, longer-term planning. And I'll take the opportunity today to outline the Commission's efforts in this respect and how we see the way forward. First, you know as well as I do that permitting has been a critical bottleneck. It has gotten in the way of renewables and grid projects, both offshore and onshore, and new EU legislation, especially the review of the Renewable Energy Directive, aims to change that and make permitting easier and faster. It's now up to member states to act upon this new framework and streamline it domestically. They need to start thinking about how to plan strategically for renewable projects in line with commitments taken in their national energy and climate plans. Within 18 months of the new directive entering into force, member states will have to map the areas necessary for meeting their national contributions towards 2030 renewable energy targets, including plans for renewable acceleration areas. They may also want to adopt plans to designate similar dedicated infrastructure areas for grids and storage necessary to integrate renewables in the system. Second, if we are to deliver on the energy transition and our offshore ambitions, we have to drastically increase the number of new network projects. This means boosting investment in grids. More broadly, we need to be bold in grid planning and development, plan more investments for our offshore grids, and have incentives for promoting the efficient operation of networks. Large offshore capacities to be deployed mean that host countries won't be the only beneficiaries. Frequently, the benefits extend further afield. So we should also be taking account that contributions from non-hosting countries are necessary. Third, it's critical we give the EU wind industry as much certainty as possible. We want to scale up manufacturing capacities, and these capacities here in Europe for offshore turbines, foundations, or installation vessels. Industry needs to have a clear pipeline of opportunities coming up. Increasing visibility on future tenders is one way to do that. And the newly revised Renewable Energy Directive will require member states to publish information on the offshore volumes they plan to achieve through tenders. Yesterday, during the North Seas Summit in Ostende, I discussed with the energy ministers present how important the clear visibility of the tenders is. The information on offshore tenders should be done on the basis of indicative goals for offshore renewable generation to be deployed within each sea basin, identified in accordance with the 10E regulation. And in addition, the revised national energy and climate plans of member states, which we are expecting already for this June, will contain offshore wind and ocean renewable ambitions. And fourth, the case for greater regional cooperation is especially relevant when it comes to wind energy. EU funding can play an important role in this respect, incentivizing certain cross-border projects that bring benefits to the EU at large. The Connecting Europe Facility for Energy, for example, although it is not exclusively for offshore, but this still can address needs in cross-border electricity projects, but also smart electricity grids and other carriers such as hydrogen networks, smart gas grids, or CO2 networks. And another milestone will be the selection of projects of common interest and projects of mutual interest, with close involvement of member states and all stakeholders. The next list will be adopting in November already this year. And finally, I see the new set of regional plans as a very positive addition to the 10-year network development plans. They will outline the most optimal way of developing the needed offshore networks. And by next January, we should have regional plans outlining grid needs per sea basin and benefits of new offshore infrastructure. I have no doubts that these will support member states, but also national regulatory authorities and TSOs in their discussions on projects, especially cross-border hybrid interconnectors. Dear friends, it's been over a year since Russia invaded Ukraine and sent our energy markets into turmoil. Europe will win this energy war when we finally deliver on our renewable energy objectives. And we will be counting on wind energy and all of you here in the hall to help us to do just that. I thank you for your attention and wish you a very successful event.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. Ladies and gentlemen, please now welcome the Minister for Business and Energy and the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden and the current presidency of the EU Energy Council, Ebba Busch.
Thank you so much, dear Giles and Wind Europe, for welcoming us here. And thank you, Denmark, for welcoming us with symbolic heavy winds today. First, let me just start briefly by also greeting back my dear friend Herman Galushenko. We've been honored to have him honor us with his presence at the TT Council meetings with the energy ministers during this spring 2 times. And it really sets everything into the perspective, the right perspective that we need to have on these issues. I can assure Herman and all of you here that this presidency will do whatever it takes to enhance ties between the EU and Ukraine in terms of energy security. This will be beneficial for everyone. And I applaud the initiative of my dear energy minister colleague Agard here today. Dear Commissioner, Ministers, dear colleagues, dear heroes of the future of the energy system of Europe, it has only been 2 years since the Commission presented its Fit for 55 package to ensure that we are on track to achieve our common target of climate neutrality by 2050, the latest. It's an ambitious plan. Russia's illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine made it clear that the EU needed to respond even more rapidly. And this is what we took with us and had at the front of our eyes going into the Swedish EU presidency. Sweden had already prepared for an ambitious presidency, and I am glad to report that we have reached a preliminary agreement with the Parliament on 2 key directives in the Fit for 55 package, the directives on renewable energy and energy efficiency. The EU will now increase its 2030 targets, a binding target of 42.5% renewable energy, while reducing energy consumption with 11.7%. It will be a game changer. For sure, it will also be a challenge. However, I am also sure that it will create conditions for EU's industrial competitiveness and new jobs in the sectors that will deliver products and services not only to the EU, but globally. The ongoing energy crisis triggered by Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine has also put the spotlight on EU's electricity market design. A well-working electricity market is needed for a secure, affordable, and clean electricity supply to EU citizens and industry. The revision of the electricity market design is a priority for the Swedish presidency, so we have I'm not worried about whether I will have work enough to last up until spring and the summer to come. We will work together with the Commission and member states on how to improve the market design against the backdrop of the ongoing energy crisis and the need to speed up the phasing out of fossil fuels and improve security of supply. The electrification of industrial production and transportation will significantly increase electricity demand during the coming decades. I can just look to my home country, Sweden. We are planning to meet an energy consumption in 2045 that will be at least doubled if we are to make the electrification of the transport and industry sector. To meet that electricity demand and reach our climate targets, we need all sources of good powers. We are now working under the slogan, under the parallel, all good powers unite. And that's definitely what I see in this room here today. Wind power really is an important part of a high-functioning electricity system and market. Security of supply will be Europe's best weapon against Russia in the ongoing energy war that Russia launched unilaterally. Wind power, both offshore and onshore, together with a range of other good sources of power like nuclear, solar, hydropower, and district heating, will build a strong energy mix and lead the way towards our security of energy supply. However, the further development of wind power is not without obstacles. As a large power producer, wind power's contribution to expand and stabilize our power system is essential. Technical development of wind power plants to enhance this objective is in our highest interest. Furthermore, where wind is welcome, the permitting granting process must be so much more efficient than it is today to pave the way for good sources of power. Therefore, I am glad that we recently managed to agree on streamlining permitting procedures in the provisional agreement on the Renewable Energy Directive. Later today, I will have the pleasure of visiting the Avedøre site and visiting the R&D facility for offshore wind in combination with hydrogen production. To me, this really symbolizes the positive development of the EU, where each region utilizes its specific resources and conditions. Phasing out our dependency on fossil fuels, and especially on Russian fuels, will require a combination of smart and efficient solutions. A confluence of baseload renewables like wind power and energy efficiency will be the recipe for green energy, for green security of supply. There is really no one single bullet that alone will take the place the fossil fuels had in the past. Nuclear, wind, electrofuels, bioenergy will all be important. I've said many times during the time that I've had the honor of being energy minister and during the Swedish presidency, I think the energy system needs a little bit more of care, love, and understanding. We need to understand each other. We need to understand what the energy system as a whole needs for it to be robust and deliver that dependable but also affordable energy that our citizens need and that our industry needs to make that green transition. So thank you once again for the opportunity to speak, and wish you all great days here at Wind Europe conference. And Wind Europe, we're counting on you. And I think the winds are blowing in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, please now welcome the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol.
Many thanks, Giles, and once again, congratulations to you and your colleagues for bringing many colleagues here. Ministers, Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, a very good afternoon to all of you. I can perhaps, like the other colleagues, underline what an important day it was for Europe yesterday in Ostende, this offshore wind declaration of the 9 countries, and I hope we will see the implementation of that, which is a very important move for the European energy security, Europe reaching its climate targets, and hopefully for European economic competitiveness. So, dear colleagues, before going to wind energy, I thought I share with you just 2 slides with some numbers to put our discussion in a context. So a bit of the global picture. No country is an energy island. So let me try to show you what is happening in the world. First, in terms of the clean energy, and then also a bit on the manufacturing side. So if I can have my slides now, I wanted to show you what happened in last year, in 1 year, on the clean energy front. The overall title I would like to give you is that the clean energy transition is moving fast and much faster than many of us think. What happened in 2022? First of all, renewable capacity expansion increased almost 25%. Huge increase. And this increase is very much in line, in terms of renewable energy, to be in line with the 1.5-degree target. It is not only Europe, it is China, it is Africa, it is United States, it is Asia and elsewhere. Second, talking about the clean energy, nuclear power is making a strong comeback in many countries around the world. We have seen about 40% increase in the new nuclear capacity additions. Then heat pumps, big increase, double-digit increase, heat pump, after years and years. In the United States, heat pump sales overtook gas boilers. In many countries in Europe, it is the same story. Of course, China remains the largest market, but we see a huge increase in heat pumps, and it will grow. For economic reasons, leave aside the climate concerns. Then we see a big increase here in the electric car sales. Very strong. China, but not only, US, Europe, and elsewhere. Tomorrow, in the International Press Conference, we are going to announce the new numbers for the electric cars for 2023 and beyond. You will see the big jump. We have many oil companies with us here. I would very much suggest you to look at these numbers carefully, what is happening in the transportation sector. As the road transportation is about 40% of global oil consumption today. And finally, when we look at the energy efficiency, a very important part of our clean energy transition, we are seeing a strong growth in energy efficiency, double the growth of the previous years. So when we look at all of them together, I think there are many lessons that we can take. First, a good news, namely clean energy transition moving fast. And second, again, an important subject which is discussed in Europe and beyond, the large-scale fossil fuel investments. In my view, large-scale fossil fuel investments today is not only a bet against our climate targets, but also it may not be a lucrative proposition for the investors as it comes to their returns of money. So this is the first picture I wanted to share with you, the clean energy transition moving fast and much faster than many of us think. Now, having said that, these clean energy technologies need to be manufactured. So installing them is something, but manufacturing is something else. When we look at the position today in the world, we are seeing a picture which, in my view, requires urgent attention of those countries who want to push clean energy. Now, there is a major concentration today. When we look at where the critical minerals are refined, there is one country, which is China, dominating the game. When you look at the important inputs, the material we use, such as aluminum and steel, 50% is in China. And when you go further, which is more important, manufacturing those, when you look at the clean energy technologies in terms of batteries, wind, solar, and the others, China has a huge dominance here. And China did a very good job in terms of industrial policy, take this as industrial policy, rather than a policy of the climate change. It was the main driver, and helped the world to bring the cost of, for example, solar down. It was an excellent work. It was a service for the entire world. However, I would like to tell you that this concentration is not healthy. We need to see diversification here. United States, with the Inflation Reduction Act, going to see a major push in terms of manufacturing, from solar to wind, from wind to electrolyzers. And I think it is very important for the European policymakers to understand the game here, so that the diversification would be beneficial for Europe. So this is, I would like to bring to your attention as a big picture where we are in terms of the global context. Now, let me come to wind and talk about wind and Europe a bit. In fact, when we look at the numbers last year, the European wind capacity additions broke another record, while the growth from the other parts of the world were not so impressive, which is definitely something to be happy about. And what will happen in the next 2-3 years, we are going to, again, end of May, when we have the renewable market update, my colleague Hemi Bahar is here, him and his team is going to tell you how the wind energy in Europe will develop, even with the current context. But I can tell you that our numbers show this year, 2023, in Europe, even with the current pace, will overtake coal, and latest by 2027, in 4 years of time, wind will overtake natural gas and nuclear power, and will become the #1 source of electricity generation in Europe. I think this is a very important fact, and this is a fact that we all have to celebrate here. It is our energy. We are going to, we don't get the wind from this or that country, and we are going to produce it here, generate it here, and without, of course, any emissions. So therefore, we should be all happy that in 2027, we are going to see and hopefully celebrate the wind becoming the #1 source of electricity generation in Europe. And here, I should also mention why it is happening, because according to our numbers, dear colleagues, wind is today, in most of Europe, the cheapest source of electricity generation. And it is thanks to the work of many of you have done throughout the years, bring the costs down, which is, of course, again, another point to be happy. But what makes us unhappy is that even this pace of growth means we are using today only 5% of the economic potential of wind we have in Europe today. So So only 5%. There is a huge potential that we can make use of. In terms of manufacturing, I mean, you see the picture here. We have to compete with China and other countries around the world. This is a major challenge for us, how we are going to make sure that the manufacturing also takes place in Europe. Because wind energy was born and raised in Europe. But it is not a guarantee that we have the leadership. I think solar is a good example to see. Some of you may remember, Europe, years ago, Europe was the leader in solar energy. Spain, Germany, Italy gave handsome subsidies, and Europe was the #1, continued to be #1. But a few years later, China took the ball, and China today dominates the game big time. Developing a clean energy technology or any energy technology is like running a marathon. Okay, a marathon is 42 kilometers. And Europe was #1, leading the race in the first 10 kilometers, but China finished the marathon as #1. Nobody gives you a gold medal because you were the #1 in the first 10 kilometers. You get the gold medal if you finish the marathon #1 after 42 kilometers. I really hope that in terms of wind, we do not see the same movie, a technology which was born and raised in Europe. In fact, it was born in Denmark here, where we are, and leave the leadership to other countries. When we look at the companies in Europe today, I see that many of the companies are having financial wind companies difficulties because of the increasing commodity prices and volatility in demand. So these are, in my view, the two key topics that we have to make sure that we address them. So it is the reason, as International Energy Agency, we have 4 recommendations for the governments. In fact, this is very much in line with the Giles' excellent introduction in the beginning. First, reducing the permitting time. It's about, on average, 5 years, and we need to have 2 to 3 years. And the issue is, among other things, issue is making the workforce bigger and much more competent. You don't need to create a new technology, invent anything, just having the right workforce there in order to accelerate the permitting. This is #1. #2, in my view, yesterday in Ostend, when I addressed the government leaders of these 9 countries, I mentioned blind spot of the clean energy in Europe and many countries, in fact, is the issue of grids. Okay? It is like you are developing the fastest and most comfortable train, for example, in the world, but you forgot to have the railways. It is the same story. We don't have the grids in order to adequate grids, in order to make sure that the renewable energies are coming to the customers in the right way. And this is another key issue. And again here, as we have taught, it is a blind spot for the policymakers. We are, this September, coming with a type of recommendations, pragmatic recommendations to governments, what we can do in order to accelerate the grid expansion, and what happens if we don't do it, what are the implications for the slowing down, in terms of slowing down of the clean energy transition. The third point out of 4 is on the manufacturing side. Dear colleagues, this is an issue, again a clean energy issue, but it is, in my view, European economy. The competitiveness of the European economy. In Europe, I can tell you our economic model is more or less based in many countries on the abundant and the cheap energy Europe gets from Russia. And industry is fed by that. And it is passé, it is over. Okay? So if you, today we say our gas prices came down in Europe after the crisis, after the highs, that's true, but they are still 3 times higher than the historical averages in Europe. 7 times higher natural gas price in Europe today than the United States. Our electricity prices are 3 times higher than the Chinese electricity prices. So we are starting from a difficult base in terms of cost of energy. And when we look at the manufacturing here, we have to look in Europe very carefully in which areas we have the advantageous position, competitive advantage, and concentrate those in terms of manufacturing. In my view, wind is one of them. And I hope that the European countries, led by the European Commission, come with incentives, direct, clear tax incentives for manufacturing of the wind manufacturing wind industry in Europe. And the fourth and the last point I wanted to mention is the increasing investor confidence. So investors, when you talk with the investors, they all love clean energy, but they love something else better, which is the rate of return. So therefore, we have to make sure that the investor have confidence in what they are doing, and as such, we have to improve the auction design to give confidence to the investors. So these are the 4 suggestions we have: reducing permitting timelines, grids, building more grids, supporting the European manufacturers in a clear way, and improving the action design to increase investor confidence. Dear colleagues, as International Energy Agency, we have a great trust in the European wind industry, what they have achieved. We know that the governments are keen to push the wind industry as part of their economic policies, as part of their clean energy policies. And on top of that, we have a huge wind potential in terms of quality and the size. It is huge. And I very much hope that we will see Europe is the leader of the wind industry around the world, both in terms of the installation gigawatts, but also in terms of manufacturing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Fatih. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to have our first panel discussion. The speakers will be the State Secretary in the German Ministry of Economy and Climate, Patrick Greichen, the State Secretary in the Norwegian Ministry of Petroleum and Energy, Andreas Eriksson, the Undersecretary of State for Climate and Environment of Poland, Anna Strzeczkowska, representing the Belgian Energy Minister, her Deputy Chef de Cabinet, Anne Strodband, and 2 of our event ambassadors, Rasmus Erbo of Ørsted and Sven Uttermølen of RWE. Panelists, please come up onto the stage. Anne. Yes. So, Anne, if I could start with you. Everyone's talking about Belgium and the event that you hosted yesterday. Great new targets. You have great plans in Belgium also for more offshore wind. Sending the right investment signals was one of the key conclusions of your summit yesterday. We've heard about it here today. And I think you've just taken some decisions in Belgium which will help on this. Your new auction design for offshore wind. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm very pleased about the success, of course, of yesterday's summit in Ostend, where we signed a declaration to move forward with 9 countries in terms of cooperation and building the offshore grid and realizing all of the intentions. including also a large industrial panel and industrial presence, because in the end, our industry will need to go to action. It's not only the governments that can decide the goals, it will need to go into action. Of course, also in terms of our grid, we have presented also our energy island that we will connect with the Danish energy island. So we are moving forward, and our latest decision effectively was a decision on the tender design on the Princess Elizabeth zone, so our new zone for wind turbines, where you will be pleased to hear that we've decided a two-sided CFD. So we've taken the advice of the IEA, giving confidence to investors, giving them the security, while on the other hand also providing for a direct supply of electricity towards industry and even towards citizens, because in the end we need to get everybody involved on board on the energy transition, which is why I'm very proud of the decision that we have taken in Belgium.
Thank you. Rasmus, the EU built 16 gigawatts of new wind farms last year. We should be building 30 gigawatts a year to meet the EU's new energy and climate targets. We've got the capital, we've got the technology. What's needed to unlock the missing investments?
Thank you very much, Giles. I think we need to differentiate between three different kinds of investments. There are investments in generation, in grids, and in the supply chain. On the generation side, I think what we very much need to see, and what we are also starting to see, is volume. We would very much like to see a developer-led build-out, where you basically set the developers free a bit more and allow us to develop outside of the tender framework. And then overplanting, where you can do more than what is actually in the centralized tenders that we are now seeing in Denmark, which I think is a great thing. On the grids, we need speed, and we need anticipatory investments. And just to highlight, just to stay with that for 1 second, I do start to see quite encouraging signals out there. Also on a day like this, when I saw the TenneT announcement coming out last week with the biggest tender for 14 times 2 gigawatts of HVDC, it's stuff like that we need to see. Then on the supply chain, we need contracts and we need FIDs. Intentions and declarations and ambitions are needed, no doubt about it. They create momentum, but they don't generate revenue. So we look at contracts and we look at FIDs and so on. And then I think my final point would be, that when you lean in a bit too much, you are at risk of falling over. But I would say that the risk of us moving too fast on the build-out of renewables across Europe is one that I think we should be willing to live with.
Thank you. Patrick, permitting. Germany has led the way in Europe in enshrining this principle that the expansion of renewables is in the overriding public interest. And you've reinforced the population-based approach to species protection. How's it going?
Well, we've seen the first court cases where the courts have said, so there is some ancient building there, there is overriding public interest, we'll build that windmill. So something we established last year, and I'm very glad that we found it also now in the Renewables Energy Directive, is now really seeing real effects in the build-out. And I think what we are now experiencing everywhere in Germany, but also everywhere else, is that it's clear now that renewables aren't anymore something we add to the system, but they will be the system. And therefore, building it is something, otherwise you don't have the electricity we need. So that is, I think, changing the discourse. And as Rasmus has just said, I mean, we are now, I think, going large time in it. If you take the EU renewables target and translate that into electricity, you end up with 70% renewables 2030, right? And we in Germany have 80% renewables 2030 as our target. We have now, we will auction off this year some 12 gigawatts wind onshore, some 9 gigawatts wind offshore. So this is not announcements anymore. This is real stuff. And I'm confident that this will also now translate through the whole value chain, including speeding up all the processes that we need.
Thank you. Sven, the EU has just agreed good new rules on permitting. We heard about it from the Commissioner and from the Deputy Prime Minister. Apart from Germany, which do you see as the model countries out there in improving things on permitting? And what would you like to see?
Yeah, I mean, without singling out individual countries, I think it's just very important that all the European countries now adopt these guidelines that are being set out by the Commission. I think we see positive signs in various member states. I think it's very important also that the principle of single points of contact, one-stop shops, for example, are adopted. That is important as well. But I would go beyond permitting because I must say I'm also concerned about the auction designs, and these things need to work together. Because if we look at the inflation that we are faced with at the moment and have been faced with for more than a year now, we clearly see the effect that has on business cases, and hence auction designs need to cater in for these cost increases and for the effects of inflation, such that the business cases work for both the investors in the wind farms and also the supply chain. Otherwise, the target simply cannot be reached because investment decisions wouldn't be taken.
Thank you. Sven, I'm taking a slight risk in contradicting the chairman of Wind Europe, but what the EU has just agreed is not guidelines, it's legally binding rules.
Even better, yes. Even better.
Which national governments have to implement. Now, Anna, Poland is about to become a big player in offshore wind. You're going to build 6 gigawatts by 2030. What's the timeline and plan for your auctions? And how are you going to ensure that Poland learns from lessons, both good and bad, that have been made elsewhere in Europe so far?
We are learning all the time. I was very carefully listening to the key speeches here, and the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden has talking about the love and understanding, and that's what Poland needs, the love and understanding of our mix, on one hand. And Mr. Birol has mentioned two very important part of Polish mix, means nuclear power and the offshore wind, which lead us to the base of our future energy mix. And yes, I can proudly announce that we are the leader of the Baltic Sea zone with 5 ongoing projects, investment projects, Ørsted PGE, Orlen Northland, Oceans Wind, RWE, Polenergia, Equinor. They are still ongoing. Of course, they have challenges in these projects, but we as a regulator are trying to add the confidence for the investments with the adequate regulation on one hand, and we increase our ambitions for the future phase, the second phase, and increase the potential gigawatts in these ongoing projects in the future. In the second phase, we will achieve 18 additional gigawatts in 4 auctions, competitive support auctions, 4, 2 and 2, 25, 27, 29 and 31. So the potential of Poland is huge, the Baltic Sea zone, and we are proud to be a leader, and we would like to keep the position.
Thank you very much, Anna. Sven, back to you. We've got to accelerate the build out of the grid, but infrastructure planning is slow. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to unlock all these grid investments we need?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it goes back also to the permitting point, obviously, because in the past that has been one of the issues for grid investments. But I would also like to point to the concept of hybrid projects and interconnectors. They are also very important, not the least to offshore wind. And there are still some definitions and designs of the respective framework required in order to unlock the investments also in these hybrid projects which combine offshore wind farms and interconnectors between member states. There has been some very good proposals by the EU Commission at the moment, including the so-called transmission access guarantees, TAGs. It's a concept that we very much support, but it clearly needs defining it in a bit more detail to ensure that the investment signals work for both the TSOs that have to invest in the grids, but also for the wind farm investors that have to invest in the wind farms sitting on these interconnectors. And then generally, to your point, I think the investment frameworks for the TSOs in most countries, as far as I understand, are in place. What it now needs to unlock that, again, it goes back to also supply chain. So the capacities need to be there in the supply chain to deliver on the high voltage cables and also on the high voltage substations or converter stations. And again, we have to make sure that these things don't become bottlenecks, which then slow down the build out.
Thank you. Andreas, you're about to run your first auctions in Norway. What role do you see for hybrid offshore wind farms and working towards an integrated European energy system?
So obviously, for us, we plan to award 30 gigawatts of areas by 2040. Our power system today is 38 gigawatts. So we plan a massive expansion, and not all that unregulated power will be needed into the Norwegian power system. So having connectivity, being able to exchange power is absolutely crucial to be able to make this system function in practice. But then I think the Norwegian story of building out connectivity to our neighboring power systems is a good one also in terms of what Europe needs to do going forward. Because on one hand, we have a very weather-dependent system. So it's been important for us to build out connectivity to be able to export when we have a surplus of water in the Norwegian hydropower reservoirs, but then also to import when we have a dry season approximately every 10 years. But at the same time, the Norwegian hydropower has been very cheap to build out. So building connectivity has also increased electricity prices in Norway for Norwegian households, for Norwegian industries. And that does not mean that connectivity does not present a net benefit for society, because it does, but it presents opportunities for some, increased costs for others. So we should not only talk about market designs, regulation, how this could be put into practice physically. We should also discuss the costs and benefits of hybrid projects and how they can be shared fairly in the market.
Thank you. Rasmus, do you think offshore wind farm developers should be playing a role in the build out of the grid?
Indeed, in terms of being part of the wider system, Giles. So if you take the hybrid solutions as an example, where you have an offshore hybrid, we have one now in Denmark on the way, where you have the energy island of Bornholm, where you will have a connection to Germany and you have a connection to Denmark. Being part of designing the framework that will unlock the hybrid solutions across Europe offshore that are needed is a role for both the developer and the TSO. And obviously, in terms of who's going to construct the transmission lines and so on, that's clearly a role for the TSO.
Thank you. Patrick, to deliver net zero, we have to electrify transport, heating, and industrial processes. How does Europe do that?
Actually, I mean, Fatih has been showing the numbers. This is now all going for heat pumps in the heating market alongside with heating grids. It's going all for electric cars and even for electrifying large parts of industry where you can do it. So I'm confident that that will take place. The question is, are we already having everything in place that we need in terms of regulation? We have the CO2 cars directive and instruments there. I think it's happening there. When it comes to the heat market, I'm currently fighting a law through in the German case to have the phase out of fossil fuel boilers. But there I'd say we could do more on the European level. so that this drive towards heat pumps really is a sustainable one. And then there's the Clean Industry Act, where there's, I would say, a lot of focus on hydrogen, which is good, but there could be more on electrification. I mean, large-scale heat pumps is going to be a solution for a large part of industry, and there, I'd say we need to do more.
Thank you for that. Anna, electrification of heavy industry, the decarbonization of your energy-intensive industries in Poland. How is the government helping to address their growing demand for decarbonized electricity?
I would like to start from 3R: reliable, resistance, realistic. And that's the goals we would like to keep in mind. Projecting the regulations, direct line is a good answer. We have just it right now in our regulatory frame, which will give the investors the opportunity to have the green, good, reliable energy, and it's realistic. On the other hand, we had released the 10H regulation for the onshore wind farm, which also gives the opportunity for investors to invest in the green energy. Of course, the hybrids as a green hydrogen as an answer is also part of this picture. I would say we have to think about the future mix of Poland and of Europe as a picture made from small puzzles. And the wise regulatory on the national and European level, we've put these all puzzles in the good, reliable, secure picture. It's interconnectors, it's investment, it's onshore, it's offshore, it's nuclear, small nuclear, large-scale nuclear. It's all interconnectors which are absolutely important, and the harmony links struggle with the increase in cost. So all together has to be put in one picture to get the good opportunity for investors.
Thank you. Andreas, you said you want to build up Norway's wind energy supply chains. How are you going to do it?
Well, I think it's important to understand the government's role in building up the value chain. And some of it we have been talking about already today: permits, ensuring sufficient amount of projects, etc. I've been amazed to meet so many business leaders the last year asking for more bureaucrats, simply more hands on deck to work with these issues in practice. But then also I think we need to design the projects in a way that makes sure that they are awarded to the companies that help build up the value chains in practice as well. What we've done with the first 2 tenders in Norway that was announced on the 29th of March was that we made sure that there was a strong competition in the pre-qualification process, or in the qualitative process for the floating wind project that we have announced. And we have also ensured that the projects being submitted for the final state aid competition cannot be qualitatively worse than the initial projects submitted. So therefore we have created a strong environment where we also have included a criteria on the building up of value chains that will help score good projects that actually help build the value chain, and also created an environment where it will not be easy to just simply flip over and cut cost in value chain to win the final bid in the process for these areas.
Thank you. Patrick, you already have a very strong wind supply chain in Germany. What are you doing to strengthen it?
Well, if we are honest, then we are coming out of a valley that was a tough one, and previous government didn't help. So now we have to go back to the levels we used to. I mean, we had 5 gigawatts in 2017, right? And now a few years of only 1. We're aiming for 10. So that's the first signal I would strongly want to send into this room. That the 16 you were talking plus the 10 of Germany, that's nearly the 30, right? Okay, so the European market will grow. Please invest now. So don't wait until the orders come in, because they will, and then you're in a moment where you can't deliver. And then suddenly the question is, why don't we get it from elsewhere? So please invest now. And I'd say with the new European temporary crisis framework on state aid, governments are now able to support you to build out that value chain. So be it through some sort of tax credits, be it through credits to invest in additional capacity, I'd say there is now a high appetite among all governments in Europe to help establish a full value chain. And then there are a few components, Fatih has been alluding to that, where we have to look at, are we dependent on China? So magnets, for example, where we strategically have to think of building up a European industry. And I think the Clean Industry Act that the European Commission has put forward with that notion that we want 40% of critical industry capacity to be in Europe, that's where that applies on magnets in the wind context. So at the end of the day, I would say the situation for the European wind industry has never been better because we now know wind is cheap and we have governments and European regulation that acknowledge that, that they want that because we don't want Russian energy in Europe anymore. Now it's time to invest, and if there is a problem that you're having investing, come to the Commissioner or come to us.
We will do that. Thank you very much, Patrick. Anne, what's Belgium's view on access to critical raw materials that Patrick's just mentioned, and recycling, which is part of that as well?
Yeah, I think we are at the same position looking at critical raw materials in terms of our security of supply. But of course, we also have our first zone. We were one of the first countries installing offshore wind turbines for our coast. We are starting to look now together with the industry how to decommission them, how to build perhaps better turbines, how to recuperate materials, recycling, how to build also recycling supply chain, and learn from other sectors where we are doing it currently to see how we can move that forward within the wind industry, because it is coming both for onshore wind turbines as offshore wind turbines. The evolution of the technology goes so fast that yeah, we need to see how we deal with these equipments. And luckily also a lot of suppliers go into recycling blades, go into the design criteria, which is of course tackling it from the beginning of the supply chain where we should be tackling it.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our first panel. We now have our second panel, ladies and gentlemen, and the speakers are the Minister for the Energy Transition of France, Agnès Pannier-Runacher, the Minister for Trade Promotion and Digital Transformation in Ireland, Dara Calleary, representing the Dutch Energy Minister, the President of the Dutch Wind Energy Association, Jan Vos, and two more event ambassadors, Trina Borum-Boygen from Equinor and Javier Rodriguez from Vestas. Please come to the stage. Agnès, very nice to meet you. Are you okay if I call you Agnès? Okay. Thank you very much, yes, yes. Agnès, it's wonderful to have a French minister at a Wind Europe event again. Thank you very much for coming. So, the United States is giving strong support to its clean energy supply chains through the Inflation Reduction Act, of course. Do you think Europe's response, the Net Zero Industry Act, goes far enough?
Well, first of all, I would say that the EU is giving a frame and setting high ambitions through its climate package Fit for 55. And this is clear signals given to the market and given to the manufacturers. Having said that, I take the advice of Fatih Birol, and especially because we have been through this situation with solar energy, and we know what may happen, and we know that we have now strong bottlenecks and strong dependence on some other countries such as China. So I really support discussions such as Net Zero Industry Act and Raw Material Act, and even such schemes as IPCIs that help us to support supply chain, European supply chain, and also multilateral cooperation such as the one we discussed in Ostend yesterday, because once again, we are showing commitments and action to develop renewables. But I believe that without a renewed push for local content and domestic European renewables industry, the transition will not be socially and politically accepted by the people. So we need to be more bolder, as you mentioned it, to maintain our supply chain. And I'm convinced that we must have some local content criteria in our auctions, for instance, to ensure that we are giving some concrete signals and concrete room for maneuver to the European players and European manufacturers. So that would be my recommendation. Last but not least, we need to build on competencies. One of the most difficult bottleneck we had in France now is clearly competencies, the level of training, the level of skills of the women and men that are now deploying renewables. And that is true for manufacturing, that is true for operations. So this is also something we shouldn't underestimate in the coming years.
By local content, you mean European local content criteria?
Yes, because we need to build the supply chain at the European level if we want to be really competitive. At a domestic level, in a country such as France, we will not have the critical size and we will not have the key factor of success to be as competitive as we should be.
Thank you. Javier, Vestas, what needs to happen to make the European wind industry competitive again? And what would you like to change in the Net Zero Industry Act?
Thank you for the question. I think that Europe has several bottlenecks today that it has been mentioned along the morning. And we have been talking about grid access. We have been talking about building vessels, building ports. We have been talking also about securing raw materials, but also it's important that we solve the bottlenecks in permitting. I think that it has been said, but I will repeat it. Last year, the target to reach net zero was 31 gigawatts. We did 16. And I think that we all have to think about it. And it cannot be that it takes 8 to 10 years to develop projects in some of the markets. And I think that this is very important because at the same time, when our customers reach the finish line, then they are building suboptimal projects because they don't want to risk to re-permit some of the aspects of the projects. So permitting is extremely important today to solve that. Then I think that we should copy some of or get inspiration in some of the good things that have been implemented with the Inflation Reduction Act. And I think that is not only about the support of the sector, but it's about the long-term visibility of the permitting. And I think that that's really, really important. And I would like to add one parameter more that has not been mentioned during the morning, which is the non-price values or the non-price criteria. And I have to say that I'm a very proud employee of a company that is helping to rebuild Ukraine. Our colleagues are today working there. I'm a very proud employee of a company that has been named the most sustainable company in 2022. And in 2023, we have been the most sustainable company in the energy sector. You know how many auctions or buying criteria in our customers were related to sustainability last year? Much lower than what you think, I can guarantee you. Much, much lower. So just think about it. I think that we need to add all those things. And I can mention examples not only in sustainability. I can mention examples in human rights standards. I can mention cybersecurity. I can mention security of supply. And I think that all those parameters have to be taken into account in order to build an affordable energy, but also a sustainable wind energy sector. And I think that I don't want to finish in a negative note. On a positive note, I have to say that the best developers and the best investors are ready. And in the industry, we know how to operate efficient factories, and we know how to operate, how to build good projects. So the main message is we are ready for that.
Thank you. Trina, non-price criteria in auctions. The EU Commission is telling national governments now they must use them. It used to be you can use them if you want to. Fine. What advice would you give to national governments in what sort of criteria to go for and how to design them?
Yeah, and I think thanks for the question. I think it's sort of in the core of that is sort of how wind can be sort of the stimulus for societal progress and value creation. And it's very close to the purpose of Equinor. And I think you just made a great point there. And I think if we just go back a couple of decades, some of us in this room have been around in the industry for so long. I mean, back in those days, it was about sort of provide the green electrons, please do no harm to people, limit in environmental impact, please keep costs low, and by the way, do a cost reduction. And then we see how sort of the next wave of asks, as you point out here, is it's more local content. All of this makes sense. There's an ask for ecology benefits. There's an ask for broader energy solutions, so power to X, batteries and all of that, but still please be as cheap as possible. And by the way, you can also go and be merchant and take that extra risk exposure. So that's sort of the setting of the criteria as they are now. Then you have, and I think a lot of people make that point today, you have a huge ambition level out there. We all see the urgency of building that regional sort of renewable energy, and we see the increasing ambitions coming from governments, which is all very positive. But we also see the signs from the supply chain around sort of commodity price increase, the whole sort of crisis and inflation pressure the suppliers, and in general there's shortage and bottlenecks in the supply chain, even without the crisis. So if all of this sort of it gets added together, it doesn't add up, right? There's a need for a reset of the model, and I think that's where some of these elements we talk about come into play. And Equinor is sort of super happy and ready to deliver on these sort of the ecology aspects, the skills development as Agnes talked to, and also the broad energy offering. But we need some help in that, and I think I'm probably just going to repeat what more people have said today, but the stability for investors like us and others is key. Otherwise, we will never see the acceleration as needed here. We need more acreage. We don't need ambitions, but we need more acreage up for tender. Get it out there. Get it out on the market. We're ready to bid. We need the speedy permitting processes. We have all made that point. I hope that's going to happen. And then, of course, the framework needs to cater for this broader societal value creation. It cannot only be about cost. So.
Thank you. Rob, in the Netherlands, you've just done a big offshore wind auction using biodiversity criteria. How did it go? What lessons did you learn?
Well, it went very well. There's a lot of creativity going on, and ecology and non-price criteria like sustainability, corporate social responsibility, circularity. What do we do in 20 or 30 years when all these turbines have to be reused or reinstalled? This is very, very important, and it's vital because currently, Giles, the climate crisis, the energy crisis, and the biodiversity crisis are meeting. The three of them are meeting, and on the intersection, we need to speed up offshore wind at a massive pace. Now, if we want to do this, we can only be successful if we work circular with respect for the biodiversity offshore and onshore. So we need to protect our species, but at the same time realize that we cannot stop building wind turbines because a certain species is much less present because of totally different causes than wind turbines. So it is a precarious balance. And what we learned is that the only way you can do it is by cooperating together with NGOs, government, civil servants, politics, and business. So in the Netherlands, in my country, 10 years ago, when we decided to build 10 gigawatt, and I was there at the table, at the time it was a very, very big decision, 10 gigawatt of offshore and onshore wind, we decided we could only do it if we would have a permanent body for all these people, all these organizations working together on offshore wind in order to prevent that the intersection of those three crises will stop building out offshore and onshore wind.
Thank you. Dara, we see that energy infrastructure is vulnerable to cyber security threats and to other security threats. What do we need to do to protect energy infrastructure?
So thanks, Giles. I think we need to put it up there front and central in our design. Governments and developers need to focus on protecting the infrastructure. We have seen energy being weaponized. Energy infrastructure will be weaponized too. In Ireland, we have a number of things. We are very much part of the NIS2 directive. We're very much supportive. We've designated 9 of our energy providers as operators of essential services. Last November, we initiated a test exercise involving all of our energy providers as to how they would sustain an energy attack. And we had a lot of good learnings out of that. We cooperate very strongly with our EU neighbours, but also with our GB neighbours and with Northern Ireland. We have a cyber security, a cyber task force between ourselves, Northern Ireland and GB, looking at critical infrastructure issues. Ireland is the 5th most digitally advanced economy in the EU. We want to apply our skills from digital to protecting our new energy infrastructure and protecting it from cyber attack. And we also have seen in the Ukrainian presentation that the physical infrastructure can be taken out as part of war. So the physical infrastructure also needs to be protected as well. And thought and design needs to go into that at this stage. As we speak about permits and as we speak about rolling out the stock, we need to roll out the protection and have that front and central.
Thank you, Dara. Agnes, could I ask you as well how France approaches the protection of your energy infrastructure?
Well, this is a question on which we have assessment of the level of risks, and we have some discussions with other countries to share the information and to share the answers given to the protection of key strategic assets. We are not the main operators in the North Sea. Which is clearly today under review, I would say, by all the countries around North Sea. But we share information, we share actions, and we share means to ensure that we can, let's say, preserve and intervene if needed to ensure that those assets will have their integration fully protected.
Thank you for that. Javier, the wind turbine manufacturers have been building bigger turbines, both offshore and onshore. Clearly, the challenge now is to just build as many new wind farms as quickly as we can. It's all about volume, perhaps rather than technology. What should we be doing about standardization, including of the turbines?
Of course. I think that in terms of needs, what the wind turbine manufacturers need or what business needs is a continuous flow of projects. We need predictability. And I think that if we have certain targets in Europe, we are ready to invest, we have invested, and we can cope with that capacity provided that that capacity is met and is constant. And I think that this is the main message on that question. I think that we need to create a system that allows us to have visibility in the medium and in the long term. What are the needs in the supply chain in terms of factories and in terms of raw materials? If we have that, we will solve a big part of the problem. Second one is that, as you said, we need to allow the turbines to have a correct time of depreciation, of financial depreciation. And I think that we have pushed the limits, and I think that we will continue doing it on, okay, without buying a certain model that we are installing right now, we would ask, okay, and what is next? And what is next? And what is next? And I think that the evolution of the sector and the decrease of the LCOE should come much more about the scale and industrialization of the products than of bringing one new product every second year. We will continue investing massively in R&D, but I think that the focus will be slightly different than what we used to see in the past.
Thank you. Agnes, we've had big inflation in recent years in the cost of wind turbines, rising commodity prices and so on. You have indexed your auction tariffs in France. Tell us about it.
Yes, you're right. In our tender procedures, tariffs are indexed during the development phase and after the commissioning until the commissioning of the farm. This gives visibility from the start to the developer. We believe it helps avoiding renegotiation of the terms of the contract, potentially, difficult negotiation in the middle of the development phase, and potentially putting the project at risk. And projects implementation, we also arrange for a period of time after the project implementation where production volumes can be sold freely on the market before the induction of the CFD contract to incentivize a fast deployment of the project when market conditions are most favorable. So this works well, to be honest. It has been implemented since a short period of time, but it's clearly a positive incentive and signal to the market. On top of that, we will renew our tendering procedure to make them more efficient, more market-oriented, and more competitive to ensure that all competitors are given a fair chance and maybe a fair market share in the French market, because we need to develop competition and we need to have different operators in France. And this is for us a positive if we want to roll over new wind farms quickly. And last but not least, we will launch a planning seafront by seafront to design the area where we will develop new wind farms for the 20 years to come. So that will allow us to launch bigger tenders on the one hand, but also maybe to have the discussion with potential operators regarding their interest for some specific area, maybe to launch PPA discussions without the support of CFD. So we need really to find innovation in our tenders so that we are clearly deploying a wind farm in a timely manner and to meet our objectives. This is clearly the plan.
Thank you. Jan, renewable hydrogen. There's a lot happening in the Netherlands. The EU now has big targets for it. You've got to match the supply with the demand. What's the Dutch thinking on this?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important that we electrify as much as we can. Industry, transportation, there seems to be a lot more possible every day with electrification than we thought yesterday. Because of obviously, if you start producing hydrogen from electricity, as you all know, you lose energy. Secondly, you should do it onshore first. So if we start doing electrolysis, we do it onshore. Thirdly, we can do it offshore as well. And we're experimenting with this with a very small facility at the moment in the Netherlands, offshore hydrogen. How much do we need? We don't really know. We have one big Tata Steel factory that will need 5 to 6 gigawatt of wind energy only. Now imagine, we built 6 gigawatt of offshore wind energy over the past 10 years. In total, we're going to build 72 gigawatt. But it makes a huge difference whether or not we use 5 or 6 gigawatt for that steel plant in the Netherlands. So this is a big question. One of the success factors, one of the elements of success in the Netherlands is that we, in 2014, a long time ago already, we made a special law and we asked the state-owned company, TenneT, to really be the one and only company working on the North Sea and placing all those grids and all those substations. And the success of TenneT today shows that it is very important to socialize the costs of net infrastructure offshore, in my thinking. You can do the same thing onshore, but then you'll need a lot more of permitting. So it's going to be very hard to make that network in all of those European countries 2 or 3 times the size it is today. So if we electrify our production, we can only do that to a certain extent, and we will need hydrogen. How much? I guess we'll need about in between 10% and 25% in our country, which is, there's a lot of energy intensive industry in the country, because we used to have this wonderful thing called natural gas, but it's not there anymore. We're going to phase it out because now we have something better, wind turbines.
Thank you. Trina, most of the industry people in this room are on the supply side, but there's a growing number of people on the demand side coming to our events. Just in the room today, we have Patrick, BASF, Covestro, and Evonik. Do you think on the supply side, companies like yours are doing enough to engage companies on the demand side and find out what sort of energy they want and when and where?
I need to answer that short, right? Yes. Oh, actually, I think nobody's doing enough, and I have a couple of points why that is the fact. So again, I think this talks to a little bit the evolution of that the industry is going through, right? And back to my point before, sort of we come from a world where it was a simple one-dimensional model. Green electrons, that was what it was about, and you provided that to government through CFDs, maybe some PPAs and all of that. It was regulated, it was well known, and we're all familiar with that model. And then now we see a move from regulated into merchant. It's still about the green electrons, but now we have a broader range of demand coming in. We have to sort of look at other customers, other off-takers, and we add some risk, and complexity increases. And we feel that we are well placed in that new world with the trading capabilities coming from the oil and gas side. And then we all hear that there's a need for a broader energy offering. I think you're just making that point. So we still have all of the mentioned complexities in my second question, but also in the first, and what everybody else has raised, right? So, and now it's not only about providing green electrons, it's also providing green molecules. And we add new and more off-takers, and you could even say some completely new customers and partnerships, potential partnerships coming up, and with the carbon-intense industry, and I think that's very welcomed in the industry. But I think we need to understand how the challenge will sit in connecting these dots across different industries. So one thing is the offshore wind industry, but these other industries, demand side for further decarbonization, are a complete different animal, and we need to bring all of that together. And I mean, we believe we're well positioned to do this, but it's a complex task, and we have competencies that we can build on, and we know some of the customers already because we provide them with gas and other liquids. But we need from states to have a framework that can cater for that. It's far more complicated than what we did before, and how does that model look?
Thank you. Dara, in Ireland, you have a huge number of energy-intensive users in your data centers and the ICT sector, of course. What are you doing to work with them to ensure that they are consuming zero carbon electricity?
So they're generally pretty on the program. They're larger companies, generally multinational. They're very aware that their customers are demanding that they have net zero emissions. They're very aware that their staff are demanding. We're finding larger companies are coming to us saying they cannot get staff until their staff are comfortable with their sustainability policies. Our difficulty is with medium industry and smaller industry. They feel it's somebody else's problem. The owner-managed business is struggling to keep afloat. So for Irish small business and Irish medium business, in the last 7 years, we've had Brexit. We've had 1 in 100-year pandemic. We have had the supply chain challenges of that, and now the war and the fuel crisis. So they're saying to us, why are you coming at us with more change? Whereas we're saying to them, we have a 35%. We have a target to reduce emissions from enterprise by 35% by 2030. And you're a part of that. So we have a carrot. We have a number of supports. And what we say to the busy business person is that we will give you support to get the expert in to do an audit of your business, to show where renewable energy can be used, to show that you will make savings in your business by getting this. We have the stick. Our emission targets are legally enforceable. We as a government have to deliver on them. And we are introducing legislation and laws that ensures business through supply chains must sign up to them as well. So we're starting with the carrot. And we will move to the stick. And we find it is one of the core principles of our white paper on enterprise, which we published just at the end of last year, that between now and 2030, every business will have a sustainability plan. And we're actually traveling the country at the moment, speaking to businesses, nearly one-to-one, advising them of the supports that are available, and that they are part of the smallest business. It's part of a supply chain somewhere that, owing to CSRD or CSDD, is part of this march, and that everybody has a role in it. So you bring our data centers, we have new rules, they have to have source on site, and they have to have sustainable source. They get the gig. They understand. Big business understands, but it's medium and small business we need to bring with us. And it comes back, I suppose, to the question you put, Lorraine. It's the argument that we all put, policymakers, politicians, but people in the industry. How do you bring small business and medium business that have already been through a horrific few years with you on this particular journey?
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to launch something which responds directly to the points that our two panels and the ministers, the commissioner and Fatih have been making. But before we launch this thing, please thank our second panel. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've all heard a lot in the last hour or so about the importance of grid connections, in particular cross-border grid connections between different countries, whether it's on land or at sea. I'm now very proud to be able to invite to the stage to launch just such international interconnector, the CEOs of the TSOs of the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, and their respective ambassadors to Denmark. Ladies, please come to the stage. So, Ambassador, would you like to say a few words?
Indeed, I would like to. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really very happy to be able to say a few sentences on behalf of the Dutch government on our participation in the Lion Link project between the United Kingdom and the Netherlands. With the North Sea becoming the largest supplier of green electricity for the Netherlands and for large parts of Europe, we are ready to expand the interconnection between our two countries. Lion Link will, if realized, be able to supply close to 2 gigawatts of electricity to both our countries, enough to power 2 million households. And this new connection would boost energy security and energy independence in Europe. Very important indeed at this time. Close cooperation on offshore wind energy and interconnection among the North Sea countries indeed is imperative. So, in case there is a surplus of wind-generated electricity, it can be shared instantly to locations with a shortage of power. And this is what Lion Link intends to achieve. And we are enthusiastically aiming for its realization together with our British partners. Emma.
Well, thank you very much, Nyenka. The UK is also delighted and thrilled about the launch of our new Lion Link multi-purpose interconnector with the Netherlands. Multi-purpose interconnectors will connect the electrical grids of countries whilst also directly connecting offshore generation. And these hybrid projects will reduce infrastructure, displace the need for expensive electricity generation, and create green growth opportunities. And they will almost triple the trading capacity between the UK and the Netherlands, strengthening security of supply for both of our countries. They will also generate investment in our coastal regions and produce green jobs in both the UK and the Netherlands. So these next generation of hybrid projects will be crucial to reaching the full potential of the North Seas and ensuring that the UK, along with our European partners, can deliver our ambitious and collective commitments to produce affordable and sustainable energy. Now we'd like to play you a short video.
Thank you. Yes, as said, I think Lion Link is a multi-purpose interconnector, and it's designed to link a future Dutch offshore wind farm of 2 gigawatt to both countries by using subsea interconnector cables. It's simply, I would say, cheaper because we will use the infrastructure both for transport when the wind is blowing and for trade when the wind is not blowing. It is faster and we need to speed on. I think it was said in the panel as well on energy transition. And it's better. I think it's better for nature. It's better for biodiversity. It's better in terms of limiting the impact on the coastal areas. I think, Jan, as you just said. It's my deep conviction, I must say, that these offshore energy hubs and then configured into a meshed DC direct current grid in the end must form and will form the backbone of this North Sea power house. I'm very happy also to hear today that this view is more and more adopted. I think, Cordy, for us, it's not just a view. For TenneT also, it's not just a it's not just a vision. We want to bring this into reality, and I think this Lion Link is a groundbreaking project. It's also a great opportunity, a first step to learn together by just starting to shape this future offshore grid. So very pleased, and Cordy, please over to you, National Grid.
Oh, thank you. It's an absolute honour to be here today with our ambassadors and, of course, with my dear friend Manon. Of course, National Grid and TenneT have a deep history of working together. With our BritNed interconnector, we've been transferring electricity 1 gigawatt per day since 2011. And it was actually 12 months ago when we came together in Wind Europe Bilbao. And Manon and I talked about the need to work on big new ideas, to really harness the full potential of the North Sea. So today, I'm really proud that after a year of working together, we take this important step forward with Lion Link. And sincerely, I truly believe that connecting wind farms to multiple markets is a real game changer for the energy infrastructure, and we'll realise the many benefits that Manon laid out. So now we look forward and we take a step forward to developing the legal and regulatory frameworks to make this a reality. And together, Manon, we will help deliver a cleaner, more secure and more affordable energy future for everyone across the UK, the Netherlands and Europe. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us join our hands again and thank and congratulate the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this ministerial opening session. Thank you for taking part. We look forward to seeing you at the next session. Thank you. Well done. Well done.